Warning, this chapter contains adult content, so to maintain the PG-13 rating of this channel, I have skipped that part and rewritten it as best I can. To read the original chapter in its entirety, please visit the link in the descriptions. Bend Around the Wind by Sky Leah. Chapter 96, Home Sweet Home.
Loki! Loki!
He jerked awake, covered in sweat and trash for a moment before he realized where he was. He blinked at the dark ceiling a few times as he tried to get his breathing under control. Stark said nothing. From the corner of his eye, Loki saw that he was half sitting next to him, hands raised, as if meaning to touch, but hovering just a little uncertainly in the air. It was not like Stark to be cautious about touching him. He looked down on himself. The cover was ripped but still tangled around him. He must have torn it to free himself from it. It was also too hard to the touch and covered in a thin layer of frost. He sighed.
Fully awake yet?
Stark asked after a moment. Loki nodded, rubbing his eyes. His skin was not even blue, but it must have been at some point. He was burning in his nightmare, so his answer was ice. Stark finally laid his hand on him and scooted closer, lying down once again. It had to be too cold for him, but the covers were starting to feel damp as the ice melted. Familiar warm hands touched his cheek, warmer than usual, so his own skin must have been still too cold. He kept his eyes closed and focused on the rhythm of his own heart, willing it to slow down. He did not feel the chill in the air, but he felt Stark shiver next to him. It made him open his eyes and stare at the ceiling again. "Maybe you should sleep in another bed. For a while," he offered. They woke up too many times in a frost-covered bed.
Hell no,
Stark said. "I cannot control it," Loki told him. Stark knew this already, but Loki felt like he needed to be reminded. He needn't be concerned while he was awake, but in his sleep, when his body and mind acted without his will, he was unable to stop himself from fighting the vivid memories conjured up in his dreams.
"It's fine,"
Stark said, brushing aside the warning again. "Your lips are blue," Loki said, and sat up to wrench the tattered remains of the cold and damp covers off the bed. The sheets were no better, and his sleeping pants were the worst. Stark just huffed and hoped and stripped the bed.
"It's fine,"
he repeated as he yawned.
"Jarvis raised the room temperature to 78 degrees. There, I'll be fine now. I'll even take some extra vitamins with my breakfast."
Loki gritted his teeth.
"A possible frostbite is not to be taken lightly,"
he said. He knew how badly something as simple as cold could harm humans.
"Look, if I don't wake up immediately to the temperature drop right next to me, then Jarvis will warn us, so it's not gonna happen, okay? And if it does, who cares? I'll heal, and I've been sick before too."
"You are being unreasonable,"
Loki argued. "I don't care. I'm not sleeping in a separate bed."
"I don't need to be cuddled, Stark,"
Loki snapped at him. Stark stopped rearranging their remaining pillows and looked up at him.
"Yeah, that's why I'm not cuddling you,"
he said, and flopped back down on the bed, punching his pillow and lying down.
"My concern is not just some inconvenience you need to put up with, so don't make it sound like it."
That was probably meant to sound just as sharp as Loki's words were, but Stark was tired and he could not hide it from his voice. So that's how those words sounded, tired and unhappy. Loki got rid of his still frosty sleeping pants and climbed back into bed. He crawled almost half on top of the man, and he was pulled into a welcoming embrace. Stark's warmth seemed to reach down to his bones immediately. He knew his hands were too cold, but he could not resist touching the warm skin under his fingers. "Forgive me, love," he said quietly. He had been incredibly hard to deal with after nightmares lately, and of course his stupid human took the brunt of it. Stark shifted to settle down some more, his hand slowly rubbing Loki's back, a reassurance perhaps, or maybe to warm him up. To warm them both up.
It's okay, it's not fine, it is what it is, but it's gonna get better, and we've been through worse.
"I do not wish to hurt you,"
Loki told him as he looked at his fingers slowly caressing Stark's skin. It was harmless right now, but he knew now just how deadly his very touch could be, especially when it was beyond his control.
"You won't," Stark said. "I have it on good authority that even your kick-ass ice magic likes me." Loki huffed and buried his face in Stark's neck to bite him. He had told him plenty of times already not to call it that. Stark jerked from the bite, but laughed as well. Loki let himself smile a little. You did not freeze me then, and you won't do it now. And I know you need time, Stark said, to get yourself back in order. He used the word dubiously, like he was not certain if it was the right one. And we've got plenty of time. Just don't try to, kick me out of my own bed just because you think I can't handle your Jotun powers acting up. Loki groaned because they managed to avoid having an actual conversation about this since they've returned, and he was still not eager to discuss it. He buried his face deeper in Stark's neck, and the gesture made Stark chuckle again. He even reached up to stroke Loki's hair.
Lady Pepper will be very cross with you if you get sick because of your stubbornness,
Loki told him when he finally turned his head to speak. Stark laughed again. It was one of his poorer attempts at changing the subject, but Stark must have realized that this was not the time to push him. Nah, she would hightail it back to New York. She knows how insufferable I am when I'm sick. That, of course, would leave you to be my loving, caring.
How you met me, Stark?
Loki snorted. Had very sexy nerves. That's a nice image.
In only your dreams,
Loki told him. Stark grinned. Oh, I am definitely going to dream about it. You and your long legs. And now he was most definitely picturing it.
Fool!
You know it. Better?
Yes, much.
Loki agreed. Even the last traces of his nightmare were banished from his mind. Now we only needed to take his mind off of everything he was reminded of because of it. His skin warmed up as well by now, but it was still too cold compared to Stark's. So Loki gripped the man around his waist and dragged him on top of himself. Stark let out a surprised noise, but let himself be moved without protest.
Well, hello. He smiled once he was looking down at Loki. I wonder where you're going with this.
You were just picturing me in outrageously indecent garments. Deduce, dearest.
Hey, if it's a common kink, we could totally... Oh, shut up! Loki cut him off and dragged him down into a kiss to silence him. Stark laughed again as their lips touched, and the sound was like a warm touch upon Loki's face.
Loki understood his own need to feel close to Stark, especially after awakening from a nightmare. It was to remind himself that he was no longer the prisoner of one of his greatest enemies, that he returned to his lover's arms. He also understood the almost desperate need he saw sometimes in Stark's eyes. Stark's mortality had always been hanging above them like a dark reminder, but it's been a long time since Loki's been reminded of how very much he was not indestructible or truly immortal. The flame of his life could be just as easily distinguished. One just needed to try a little harder or have the right tools. Maybe it was something Stark refused to think about before this. Maybe he already accepted that he would be the first to go, leaving Loki behind. But now he was left with the cold reality that a human could very well outlive a god. Loki ran his fingers down Stark's spine and rested his hand on his waist, just above the curve of his butt. He was not naked like Loki himself. That needed to change. Stark huffed out an amused laugh when Loki started pushing off his single remaining piece of clothing. You're distracting me with sex so that I don't ask questions you don't want to hear, Stark said. Loki bit his shoulder in answer.
We will have time for words later,
Loki told him as he moved his lips to Stark's neck. Stark was not having any of it, though. He actually stopped Loki. Just, if you won't talk to me, then at least a hatchet, okay?
He's even worse than you are,
Loki told him.
As you said, we've been through worse. I've been through much worse and for much longer. There is no need to act so differently around me.
You know what he had to do to help you, Stark reminded him. Loki bit his lip and settled back on the pillow. Stark rolled off of him. See, this is why you need to talk to him, or heck, just let him pamper you a little. You've been acting like nothing happened, and he's following your lead. And it's totally driving him nuts. Even I can see it. Loki wanted to argue, wanted to snap that Stark did not used to care about Edget's well-being all that much. But the venomous words vanished before they could reach his lips.
Fine,
he sighed. Hatchet was too big-headed to ask something for himself, especially to ask Loki for something such as this. His mist-colored eyes and the sun-touched locks in his hair were constant reminders of how much his friend had been through even before Loki was taken. He shouldn't need Stark to remind him of what his friend needed from him. He'd been so lost in his own mind even after he regained what had been locked away by the other. Those days he spent in a haze of pain and confusion were still there. They did not vanish after he recovered. He remembered how he escaped his chains, remembered the battle, and he could still recall all that he felt while he was ignorant of his own self and history. Summoning ice and cold in his sleep was infuriating for several reasons. From the way Stark looked at him, it was clear that he thought that Loki was still not accepting of his heritage. In a way, he was right. Loki still couldn't stand in front of a mirror, think of himself as Jotun, and not feel at least some anger or sense of betrayal. He still felt strange when he looked at himself in his Jotun shape, even if no longer disgusted. But what truly bothered him about waking up covered in ice was something else. On one hand, there was the very real threat of injuring Stark, the stubborn fool. But on the other hand, it was the confusion he could not stand, for his mind said one thing and his instincts another. In his mind, being Jotun was still not him. But now he could remember the relief the cold brought, its soothing presence. He remembered the rightness he felt when he could fight the other with everything he had. He remembered being completely in peace with what he saw of himself, being unquestioning of his own nature. Oh, the blissful ignorance. So now the cold felt right, almost natural, that until Loki remembered Laufey, Odin, and everything else that came with being Jotun. The baggage, Stark would say. He was going to need more time to come to terms with this.
You got what you wanted, Loki said then. You talked, I listened, I even talked to myself. Now can I get what I want?
He really needed to bury his increasingly darkening thoughts now. Stark smirked and immediately leaned over to put kisses on Loki's stomach. Whatever you want. You know that, Stark said as he slid slowly lower, leaving tender bites and wet kisses on Loki's skin. He smirked up at Loki from his position. You just need to tell me. Loki slid his fingers into his hair and pushed his head lower.
Then use your mouth,
he demanded. You know, when I told you to let it pamper you a little, I didn't think you would end up in the middle of the living room braiding each other's hair, Stark said as he stepped into the room. Hey, bud.
Hello, Master Stark,
the gnome chimed from Loki's lap. Hatchet stopped weaving the gemstone into Loki's braid and looked up at Stark. Well, first of all, I'm doing all of the braiding here, he said. Second, from your tone, I assume there's some Midgardian joke here. Nah, just socially constructed gender norms, which are bullshit, and we all ignore them anyway, Stark said. And thirdly, Hatchet leaned forward to look at Loki. I knew Stark was behind this. Not completely, Loki protested, which made the elf snort before he went back to weaving the stone into Loki's hair. Who cares? Hatchet said, and he sounded sincere enough. I know you need a gentle, or not so gentle, shove in the right direction once in a while. Loki resisted the urge to roll his eyes while Oakbud giggled in his lap. Anyway, Bapper was supposed to drop by. That's why I came up. Is something about a party? Banquet, Loki corrected, but it was already a lost cause. He knew that. Despite waking up so early and exhausting themselves after, neither of them had the intention of going back to sleep. So while the sun was not even up, Stark still headed down into his workshop while Loki dragged Hatchet out of bed, spent the day in his company. Oakbud. Loki didn't even know how long he's been there. He was getting all too used to both him and Pilskin, who were somewhere in the house too, presumably. Miss Potts just stepped out of a car, sir, Jarvis told him helpfully. Stark turned and walked out to greet her. Loki could hear the heels of Pepper's shoes tapping on the floor after a few moments. Soon enough, she was walking in with her usual brisk pace, her assistant, Adam, dutifully at her side. I literally do not have the time to deal with this party more than I already have, she said. I know it's important, and I know everything must be in place, but enough is enough. Oh, you finally picked out the new furniture. Stark looked around again because of course he only noticed his brand new living room when it was pointed out. Oakbud greeted cheerfully.
Hello, Oakbud.
She smiled warmly. Yeah, that's right. All furniture is all picked, Stark said.
Not by you, obviously,
Pepper said.
You never would have gone for that desert stone cocktail table,
She said, looking at the new piece of furniture before glancing over at Loki.
Very nice choice.
Thank you. Loki smiled in return. Stark looked very confused for a moment, like he was unable to see how his new furniture and Loki were possibly connected. Hatchet chuckled quietly behind him.
So the party is in a week,
Pepper continued.
The menu needs to be approved. I need the final guest list, the seating, the times of arrival.
Pepper, I really don't think that I'm actually qualified to answer any of these questions, Stark said.
Not you,
He told him and walked past him to hand over the folder full of papers to Loki.
Look over the menu, say what needs to go. The guest list needs to include diplomatic ranks and connections. I don't want to start a war.
Loki was already looking over the menu while she continued.
Also, I need to know where this portal of yours will be. We can't shove aside decorations last minute. And you need to come to the concert hall personally and show how big this cold room is going to be. Where you will set up that magical barrier,
Loki offered,
so that I know how many tables and ice sculptures fit in there.
That won't be a problem, Loki agreed. Elk is a very fine choice, but what is sushi?
A roll of cold vinegared ice with fresh raw fish, seaweed, or some other flavoring,
she explained.
Ah, the Kaldafar will enjoy that, I believe.
Loki nodded.
But no wine. It is elven custom to give a couple of barrels to their host or hostess from their own wine when they are invited to a foreign land. It would be a great insult to have local wine already served. Other ales and spirits may remain.
Pepper's assistant was dutifully making notes.
And it would be best if I oversaw the arrangement of the tables myself. It is without a doubt the single most important detail.
Okay, hold up, Stark interrupted. How long has this party planning been going on with you two? He asked, looking first at Loki, then at Pepper.
From the very start, of course,
Loki said.
I told you Lady Pepper is far too busy to arrange a feast of such magnitude. She has your company to run after all. Besides, they are our guests, and not hers.
Well, good to know that you get along.
Speaking of guests, I have one large bomb left to drop, but I wanted to get the smaller things out of the way first.
Pepper spoke up. Oh, this is not going to be good. I know that face, Stark said.
Well, it's not ideal, she said. Looks like news of this event and who our guests are going to be traveled far.
We do want to make a big deal out of it, Stark said.
No, so this is different. I got a call from the White House an hour ago.
Oh, crap. Stark hung his head.
The president knows that we're going to have rulers and royalties from other planets, and she decided that it's too big a diplomatic event for her not to be included.
Well, crap. Wait, she? Who the heck's the president? Stark asked. The look on Pepper's face was quite unimpressed.
Kathleen Carday.
Pepper said. Stark frowned as he thought about it for a moment. From the Marines?
He asked. That one.
Pepper nodded. Oh, I gotta look up how that campaign went, Stark said with a small huff. I know her, right? I remember her.
She was at several weapons demonstrations you did.
Pepper nodded. Did she hate me?
Not particularly.
That's good.
Is she important?
Loki asked, focusing on the more important matters.
The president is the leader of this country,
Oakbud answered helpfully from his spot in Loki's lap.
Head of the state, the government, and the commander-in-chief for their entire army, including the secret ones.
So she is important. She's not above any of the elven lords and ladies, though, Loki said. How is the Avengers' relationship with her?
Very good,
Pepper said.
She's been publicly supporting them, even back when she was just a senator. She used the photo of her shaking Steve's hand a lot around the elections.
Then she will be seated close to them. Same table as T'Challa. He is the king of a Midgardian country, as I recall. So, same rank, then.
I love how easily you dismiss political leaders.
Stark smiled.
I'm a prince,
Loki explained.
I have dealt with much more powerful leaders than the likes of her. She can come if she so wishes. I see no problem with it.
That's certainly good to hear because she was not going to take no for an answer, Pepper said. Can you come over to the concert hall with me right now? I don't have any other free spots in my schedule before the party.
Certainly,
Loki agreed.
Are you finished?
He asked from Hedget. Yeah, seriously, what's up with the braiding, honestly? Stark asked.
Loki received some gifts from the local faith,
Hedget explained to them.
and it would be rude not to wear them for an upcoming feast. I'm trying out how they can all fit.
Stark stepped closer to look at the various gemstones Hatchet wove into his braid. Pepper leaned a little forward to take a small look as well. Stark frowned and pointed at one of them. It looks like a ladybug,
he said. Ah, so he meant the ruby. It is a ladybug!
Oakbud squealed in delight.
That was for me!
Stark looked like he was about to say something that would doubtless sound rude to a fae, but Pepper spoke before he could.
It looks lovely,
Pepper said with a smile. Oakbud looked up at her with a smile, then he let out another tiny squeak, hopped off Loki, and ran away. We're never getting rid of the gnomes now, are we? Stark asked.
No,
Loki chuckled.
I'm still not sure about the color.
Hedget said thoughtfully as he ran his fingers down some of the gems.
It will go finely with blue,
Loki told him.
You're planning to wear... Oh, truly?
Loki stood up, stretching out his legs, finally. Both Stark and Hedget were staring at him, probably burning with questions on the inside.
Yes, I am serious, Loki said. It will be important.
Stark was opening his mouth, probably to say something that would either anger Loki or turn him into a ball of warm and soft emotions. So Loki put up a hand to silence him and stepped closer to kiss him on the lips.
We can discuss this later, he said.
Fine. Wait, why are you taller? Boots, new boots. Your boots have heels?
For the banquet, yes. And it's just 3 inches.
Loki shrugged. Why? You didn't feel tall enough? You're giving me a complex. Stark complained. Loki chuckled and leaned in to peck him on the lips again.
I'll see you later, darling.
Then he turned a little to be able to address Hedget as well.
And behave while I'm gone. I don't want to find either of you injured, maimed, or locked up in unlikely places when I return.
It was my time! Hedget threw his hands up. Loki did not deem that with an answer, just with a meaningful look that made Hedget smirk and Stark roll his eyes. Yes, they would be just fine on their own. Surprisingly, Stark did not complain at all again, just waved them goodbye. If he wouldn't have despised making such arrangements, he probably would have insisted on accompanying them.
You are good for him,
Pepper said quietly as they sat down in the car, for she greatly disliked teleporting.
From you, my dear Lady Pepper, that is a shining endorsement.
You should have learnt from Tony by now that sweet talking gets you nowhere with me.
Loki chuckled, not even trying to silence himself. Pepper was also unable to keep the smile off of her face.